All right, guys, let's get rolling here. Glad everyone could make it. Hopefully, I can deliver some value for you today and the time that you're spending with me. I want to talk about, sort of the three biggest mistakes that I see most common and that contractors make that just absolutely kill profits. Yes, the ugly word, profits. And I want to see how many of you guys can relate to some of these things. So, how many of you guys have a belief out there that, more contracts, think more jobs equals more profit? Right? So if we're just busier, if we got more leads, if we had more sales, we would be more profitable. It's a very common belief, and I think a lot of us start off with that initially in the beginning. As you learn and as you grow, you tend to dismiss that, especially if you've been doing this for a while. You realize that it's make belief. So a common belief is taking every job boosts your profits. So just doing more, and that's just not the case, right? So it actually spreads your resources thin, lowers the quality, increases mistakes. And especially if you are a smaller operation, I would say that this is the biggest plague, all right? Is guys tend to want to take on more than they can chew, and then they don't recognize the effects it's having on their business. So the reality of chasing every opportunity leads to chaos, not growth. And over 60% of small contractors report burnout from overextending. So out of curiosity, and see how many people we have alive on here, how many of you guys have bitten off more than they could chew in their business before? How many of you taken on really big contracts, kind of got through them and really found yourself burnt out and grinded out on them? I know I can certainly say I have. Okay. It always seems to happen at funny times, right? It seems to be a feast or a famine, right? Sometimes we're totally swamped, right? And a lot of times those are symptoms, okay? And we're going to talk about some of those things. So what happens when we are in famine? What happens to a lot of contractors when we're in famine, when we freak out at Christmas time because, we don't have enough in our pipeline? All right. I'll tell you some of the newer contractors, they tend to lower their price or chronically underprice work. All right. Big problem, especially if you don't know your numbers. If you don't have a system for estimating and controlling your numbers, it's not uncommon to make mistakes or make emotional decisions to lower price or to think that price is, what's driving you being busy or not. Hold on, let me put everyone on mute here. And again, these things are simply not true, right? So many contractors underbid to win jobs. Okay, I can't tell you how many contractors have sat in front of me and complained about how everyone was underpricing, and they had to underprice just to get work. Okay, that's a terrible place to be, and it's a terrible mindset to have. I'll say that it comes from a lower, deeper problem of thinking that we are not in abundance, and we absolutely are in abundance. So how does this happen, right? Where we end up with leads, when we have razor thin margins, kind of put ourselves on a treadmill. All right. What I see most often and what we find and discover, even with clients that have been doing it for a long time, right, with contractors that have been in the business for a long time, is there are slow and steady profit leaks or margin erosion that occurs on jobs. All right. And it simply comes down to this: is either their system is failing them. All right. Most of the time that is the case. All right. Where, what we are thinking our costs are going to be actually end up being much higher. All right. And then compound that with low bidding or underpricing. All right. And we find ourselves in a world of pain. The other thing is not realizing that your business has natural ups and downs and seasonality to it. It doesn't matter which kind of contractor you are, builder, doesn't matter. And those patterns you've been experiencing for many years. Once you start to recognize your sales patterns, all right, you tend to you react less. All right. So those months where you're generally shorter, being a roofing contractor, typically we would see that in January and February. We don't anymore. Those are actually really, really good months for us, especially in the sales, because we pick up our marketing. So we improve our marketing and we push harder, all right, between October and November. All right. That way we have got an abundance of leads and opportunities that are converting in that period where everyone else is slowing down because they've taken on too much and they're trying to finish out their year. They stop marketing, they stop, feeding their pipelines and sort of coast through the last parts of the year. Anybody else had this experience before? Anybody else found a natural shoulder season within their business? Just out of curiosity, maybe give me a one in the chat there. Anybody else experienced this? Oh yeah. Okay. So 1 in 3 contractors lose money on at least 10% of their jobs. Okay. And I would say that number is actually much, much higher. And it doesn't really account for the things that, that we set out, setting. My personal opinion and the way that we should be, every business should be striving for is to be within a 5% variance. Okay. So I use this term a lot. Variance is what you've budgeted for a job and what that job actually came out to be. Okay. If you can get within a 5% variance, okay, and you can do that consistently, you've mastered your pricing, all right, and you've actually weaponized it. And we'll get into that a little bit later, but there's a enormous opportunity to understanding how your costs and your numbers are actually working out. And I would say having the discipline and having the right metrics and looking at the right things allows us not to make some silly mistakes that I see a lot of, and the things that cost us the most amount of profit. So number one, poor job costing, poor job tracking. Okay, that is the number one killer. Again, I have worked with contractors doing 10, 20, 30 million that had no idea whether they were making money or not. Imagine that. How scary would that be? Right? No ability to make any changes, just pure chaos at that level. What most guys aren't recognizing is by not doing job costing, you are cutting yourself off on about 10 or 15 other critical processes to your business. Okay? It's a major aha moment for anybody that hasn't, dedicated themselves, at least in some portion, into getting their numbers and tracking. Okay? It's where you start to regain control of your business and understand that you have strategic advantages by being very good at understanding the numbers, right? So not tracking labor and materials and overhead in real time. Okay, this is another one. A lot of contractors are still relying on their regulatory accounting systems. Okay, so for anyone that's new, a regulatory accounting system is just as it sounds. That's your QuickBooks, that's your accountant, that's your bookkeeper. Okay, they will never help you proactively run your business. Their job is to report your income to the government, and by default, their job or their service is always behind. All right, meaning that the data that they are sharing with you today is 3 to 4 days old at best, weeks, months, maybe even a year behind. All right, and you can't make decisions with that information. All right, which leaves us at a disadvantage. Okay. So contractors who track costs weekly are 2 times more likely to hit profit targets. Imagine that. Okay, so if you imagine you had a dashboard and you could see your cost, imagine your team was all playing on that job cost and all working towards that same low variance. All right, where profit was the center. How differently would your business look? Right? How much more clarity would you have? What kind of decisions could you make? All right, what kind of decisions would you stop making? Maybe is a more important question, right? Imagine all those reactive decisions that hurt your business. Imagine how many of those you could curb by just having real-time data for these things. Okay. So mistake 3, and probably one of the most prevalent, especially if you haven't watched my training from last week, you're not sure of your offer, you haven't really found a good, consistent customer base yet. All right, you're starting out. I see this kind of chronically throughout the contractors I've worked with and many other businesses we've looked at, is just taking the wrong jobs. Okay, so understand, right? There are particular jobs, and we all know which those are in our own head, in our own heart. We know which jobs we're really, really good at doing. Okay, the ones that give us the least amount of aggravation. Some of us don't know which ones are the most profitable, all right, because we don't know our numbers. But the idea here is that accepting every job that's even outside of your specialty immediately adds variables to your profitability. Okay, makes it harder. All right, we independently put ourselves on the hamster wheel. Okay, and that's a terrible place to be. All right, so taking on jobs that don't fit your business. All right, sometimes it's taking on jobs that are either too big or too small. Okay, that could be an example. Maybe taking on things that you can do. All right, but you're not efficient at. All right, so I want you to think about those kind of jobs that right now that you've taken, and again, we're all guilty of it. There isn't probably anybody here that hasn't done it at one point or another. It's a part of growing and learning. All right. But think about it right now. What kind of jobs would you be okay with if you never got again? Okay. Right. It also hurts our brand. Okay. So it hurts our marketing. It hurts our sales. It confuses, our salespeople, or confuses you, the salesperson. All right. And again, it's very chronic. Once you get into it and you don't recognize it and you're not able to use data and numbers to make decisions with, you can chronically continue to take these jobs. Another good example is, for guys that are, remodelers maybe, okay, and they work directly for a homeowner, but the odd time they do some jobs for some investors, right? Same job, very different experience though, okay? What I found with investors, and I'm sure there would be a few people that would agree on this call, all right, is that they have a different outcome that they're looking for. And it doesn't involve you making a lot of profit, all right? Most homeowners have priorities, all right? It's their home. They're willing to invest and have premium, premium service. They don't want just anybody, where an investor has a different mindset, a different set of priorities that are going to affect your profitability. And again, their ultimate outcome or objective is to make a profit off of working, with contractors, which is absolutely fine. All right. But that might not be a fit for your business that's trying to retain a, a 30% or a 20% net margin. Okay. That's just not going to happen. A lot of contractors can also run into this if they're doing commodity services for builders. Okay. So for a commodity service, all right, again, I'll use a roofer as an example. All right. That's doing new construction homes for a large scale builder. They're not going to allow you to make a margin, high enough, all right, that you would make, doing a residential house. Okay, and I'm just using that as an example. All right, but I want you to think about that again, and the way your business is structured and how you're looking at your profit and scalability. Okay, so 47% of contractors say bad fit jobs caused major headaches last year. Imagine that. Okay, everyone here has a nightmare customer, don't they? Everyone can probably think of that customer right now in their mind, the one that's given you a hard time. I have a few that haunt my dreams to this day. Okay. But, if you really dig deep into it, most of us could also predict that that customer was not a good fit for our business. They went into it knowing that, hey, you know what? I don't like the vibes that I'm getting from this, this client, right? And a lot of it is, when we know we should have said no, all right, but we said yes. Okay, so I'm
Hey,
going to
Jay,
encourage everyone. Yeah.
I just talked to one of those this morning, and like every time she talks to me, I'm extremely aggravated. But
Yep.
I'm 8 hours into this job, and I haven't seen a penny yet. At what point do you pull the plug?
Second, so I'll tell you from my perspective. Okay. The second the red flags start to come up, all right, you're going to learn, and you hear me preach about it all the time, that my most profitable word that I ever learned was the word no. The second somebody gives me that vibe, or we determine that they're not our ideal client, and we know our ideal client very, very well. They have to be within a very small degree of that customer, because we sell to the same person, same type of person over and over again. But the second the red flags start going up, all right, you know your business better than anybody else as an owner. Okay. Then we have to get used and actually feel empowered in saying no, or no thank you. Okay. And again, it's when we question it. If you already know, if you already have that feeling, 9 times out of 10, it's going to be right. Okay. And what we don't understand and what we aren't really factoring into it is that we take that customer and we don't recognize the damage that it causes and the loss of opportunity, the loss of momentum that it, creates in our business. All right. Just the pure stress, even, that your personal time. If you've already spent 8 hours with her and you haven't got a dime yet, to me, you lost four customers, right? So four
Yeah.
potential customers or four potential opportunities could have just passed by. And that's what happens the most. Okay. And, we see this pretty consistently, especially as we start to systemize sales processes. So one of the easiest ways to, really start to see this in real time, if anybody's taking a good quality or a good amount of leads, all right, from various sources, is when you start to lead score. Okay. I know I have a few guys on here that are working with us, so we lead score. All right. It's an amazing thing that happens, an amazing thing that I've seen and that I've learned firsthand. When we stick to a criteria of what our customer should be, all right, and we don't go on our gut feelings and our emotions or how we're connecting with that customer, and we only go on a more of a data driven matter of fact approach with them, all right, our priorities and the type of customers that we start to service change pretty dramatically. All right. Opportunities start to appear that you didn't see before. People that, maybe you had written off or been biased towards, all of a sudden start being a lot more attractive, right? But a lot of us don't take that time to build in that sales screening, all right? And, don't learn to sort, okay? A lot of what we do, especially as you can generate, leads, is learning how to sort your leads, learning how to put people in priority, okay? And especially getting good at saying no. Okay, I often tell people over 50% of my leads, all right, they don't qualify. So 50% of our leads, we say thanks, but no thanks. All right, and that can be for any, slight variation. Now, could we have sold some of them? Absolutely. All right, like our business could grow a whole lot more, but at the end of the day, all right, we want to make sure that we're dealing with the exact person that our business is set up to serve. Okay, anytime we get outside of that is when problems happen. All right, and when in fact we think we're adding to the business, but we're actually causing the business to slow down and taking momentum away. Okay, and this can go for builders. This can also be for like it's universal. All right, and making sure that you're connecting with the right, the right clients that are going to help grow your business, not help, reduce your size and increase your stress.
So what I'm
Oh,
struggling with, I guess, is I don't have a ton of leads coming in, and so I'm more inclined to try and make it work because I know there's not a ton of leads coming in because we were in a small area.
yeah. So that's a mindset thing. Okay, whether you realize it or not, and again, this is something that you can quantify yourself. All right. The problem that you are experiencing now it actually started to happen 90 days ago. Okay, so we're just responding to it now. All right, and the reality of it, and I'll tell you, my my true observations is that you will close just as much, if not the exact same number of people, whether whether you say, no to this person or continue to work forward with them, you're going to end up in the same, the same place. Does that make sense?
Just with less headache.
Right? Right. So, but again, it's when you've done it enough, you either learn through pain or you learn through process. Okay. So learning through pain is the hardest way because it's, the information is right in front of you, but you've got to have the discipline. You've got to have enough trauma. All right. And these customers can be outright trauma. I still remember my worst customers to this day, and I'm telling you, I have nightmares about them. Okay. It only took me about a decade to figure that out. All right. Now we can do that a lot quicker. There's never been a better time and I would say in history to, generate leads and have opportunities and to really be critical of who we're doing business with. All right. Your customers also diversifying and becoming a lot more specific as well. Okay. So, keep that in mind. When you find the right fit customer, and Mario, I know you've connected with a few lately, right? Like, what's that feeling like compared to the one you're having now?
No, I'm just excited to move forward, and with this one,
Huh.
I'm just, I'm always pissed off.
Okay. So immediately you should stop. Immediately. All right. Because that's not something you ignore. All right. If somebody is, and again, don't worry about, in my opinion, like taking on a bad customer will drain more life and more energy out of you. All right. Than, your perceived, lack of business. All right.
So
There's
cut
never a
my
reason.
losses. The eight hours
Absolutely.
just gone. Pull the plug. Done.
And you'll watch. It's the power of attraction, right? So next thing you know, you'll have three or four that'll just convert like that, right? Out of nowhere, and they'll be more your ideal customers. That's been our experience all along. I can't scientifically explain it, but I can tell you for sure that if, one bad customer, one bad, bad apple in your batch can, be devastating to your bottom line. Okay?
And are you worried at
And
all that they're gonna be pissed off?
not at all. Not at all. Nope.
They'll find someone
And
else.
and exactly. So, and you know what you do if you're really smart about it? You go to your nearest competitor, all right? You introduce those two together and you say, "Hey, I wanted to introduce you to," and you send those customers you already know are bad for you down the road to your nearest competitor, right?
Okay.
Embrace that. Okay. I've been doing it for years. Okay. Because again, I can identify them very quickly. And our screening, our sorting process is so, refined down. All right. We're very picky. All right. That I can do that. And, the funniest thing is, a lot of these other guys are very grateful for the ones I send them. But we know, like, they're the ones that are price sensitive. They're the ones that have already given us, signals that, they don't align with our business. And we have the courage to say no. All right. And if you want to take it one step further and be strategic with it, introduce them to your supplier or to next, competitor and, send them their way. Okay.
Okay.
So lower profits, higher stress, more callbacks, reputation suffers, harder to win referrals. Okay. 70% of contractors say profit pressures hurt work-life balance. Imagine that. Okay. So, again, when we think of these kind of customers we get involved with, the ones that are, having huge amount of callbacks, right? Unnecessary callbacks, I'll call it. How many of you guys have had a customer like that, right? The one that freaks out and creates threats and creates stress and just brings chaos. Again, like I said, I have a few of them in the back of my head right now, and that I could probably cry over to this day. And I haven't engaged with them for many years, but I could still remember them, and I can still remember the negative energy that they brought, and how it affected my performance and everybody I had on my team's performance and morale. All right. It takes a while to get over that, and it's hard to find the lesson when you run into these nightmares. Okay. So we have to refocus on core services, especially specialize in what you do best or who you do best for. Okay. Sometimes when we take, maybe if you're doing a lot of high-end work, okay, and you have a specific type of customer, all right, and then all of a sudden maybe take on somebody that's not in that, in that category, all right, they come with a whole set of needs that you might not be able to fulfill, and then we have a mismatch. Okay, it's not necessarily their fault, it's not necessarily, your intent, all right, but it happens. Their expectations are higher, all right, they may be price sensitive, they may have a whole bunch of, conditions, undiscussed or, unstated conditions that you're knowingly just putting yourself in on, all right, and that's the worst, right? When you are, doing everything right, all right, but you're working for somebody that can't appreciate it or can't work with you at that level. So we got to build a reputation for quality, not quantity. Again, the easiest way I can explain this statement is, and most guys don't know, by discounting your price just 10%. Okay, you're actually putting your hand up and saying, I'm in for 33% more work, meaning that you will have to do 33% more volume to make the exact same money. Okay, let that sink in for a second. Now think about all the numbers that we lose control of. All right, how many times we've been overbilled by suppliers? Okay, how many times we lose track of our numbers while we're doing a project and don't use discipline and management accounting to manage our business with firm numbers. How many times have you just lost yourself in trying to serve a customer and thinking you're going to make a big profit at the end and only to find out you haven't, or you're still struggling, or you have cash flow problems. Okay, guys, these are chronic symptoms I deal with day in, day out with a lot of contractors, and it starts with you recognizing what we prioritize, all right, and what the consequences are of making these small decisions. Okay, I'm sure there's nobody on this call right now that hasn't given somebody at least a 10% discount. All right, well, maybe we'll challenge. Is there anybody here that has not, has never given a discount more than 10%? I don't see any ones, so we're all guilty. All right, if not more. Okay, and not being able to relate that back to the consequences of it, all right, makes it potentially chronic. All right, and I see contractors that have worked for decades, working really, really hard, all right? Managing teams, lots of stress, only to not have much to show for it. I know I can put my hand up personally for the first decade of my career. All right, I actually managed to lose about $8 million after all the lawsuits were done. All right, not something I'm terribly proud of. Okay, but that's what can happen. All right, recognize that we are in a very high risk, low reward business if you allow it. Okay, I don't think there's a more riskier business that we can be involved with, as an overall market. I don't think there's more of a riskier business, with all the variables that we have to be able to absorb to earn a profit in this business. It's not like, selling a product, right? So we want to streamline operations and profits. So, let's start to talk about some of the solutions to these problems. Okay. So first being, standardizing processes, checklists, templates, repeatable steps. All right. Your business should be boring. All right. I'm going to say this over and over again till someone really, really hears me and shows me what a boring business looks like beyond my own. All right. My business is so boring. Things are done the exact same way every single day. All right. That I don't have to be there anymore. And in fact, I would hate to be there. And they would hate to have me. All right. Because I like change. I like challenges. All right. When you get your business to a point that there are no more challenges and there are no more variables or no excitement, all right, you will find yourself profitable, I assure you. Okay. So the other thing is contractors using digital tools save about 8+ hours. And this number that was from a 2023 statistic. I am going to assume that that number now is much, much higher. I can tell you just with AI tools that I'm using within, our customers' businesses and my own personally, that number is at least double that. Okay. So for anybody that isn't completely, dedicating themselves to the digital tools, using systems, CRMs, project management systems, documentation. All right. This is where you really got to understand that there is a ever closing gap, all right, of people who will, just outmaneuver you and be, working a lot more smarter, all right, working a lot less hours and making a lot more profit than you, all right, without, putting in the kind of effort that you are. So I encourage anybody here that, has some gaps in their systems or their processes or don't have a good idea what checklists and templates can do for them, all right, to reach out. We'd be happy to have a chat with you, even if it's just to give you the ideas of what you need to do next step. All right, but take this very seriously. Understand, all right, it's no longer a novelty in this business, it's a requirement, right? Anybody that's not consistently working on their business and building, these digital tools and these digital processes, all right, will be very, very quickly left behind. All right. And I'm open to anyone arguing with me about that point if you care to. All right, so let's talk about some quick wins and some fast fixes. All right, things that we can do today. And I hope that anybody that's still with me on this call, all right, is in the position to take action today. All right, no excuses. We're going to be able to take some steps to help to improve our businesses. All right, and we don't need anything fancy. First thing we're going to do, we're going to raise prices on low margin services. Okay, one of the easiest ways, all right, to get rid of that service you shouldn't be offering is jack the price. Jack it to an unreasonable number. Okay. Again, happy to share an example. We don't like vinyl siding. All right. We get asked to do vinyl siding a lot. And when people get our numbers, if we do price it, if it's a part of another type of project, we almost always lose it. It's because I have 100% margin on vinyl siding. I haven't won a job for vinyl siding in about 8 years, and I'm okay with that. All right. So a nicer way not to say no. All right. But if it's a part of a scope that we're trying to cover, we'll always give it separately, or if someone's put pressure on us to, include the vinyl. All right. And it's very simple why I don't like vinyl. I don't believe in the product. I don't, don't like the conditions that come with it. And, our salespeople, can find a lot better products to recommend and prefer. So anybody looking for vinyl, pay about the exact same or more on a composite. All right. So again, we can upsell or add-ons. All right. So I want you guys to think of, especially if you are a service-based company, a home service-based company, one of the easiest ways I think nowadays is, really working on a good perfected offer, maintenance and warranties. Okay. having a good maintenance and warranty offer in place, even if you're just a contractor, having a maintenance offer, if you've completed and you've got a good customer that you've had a good project with, they're going to have other things that they need done, down the road. Offering the maintenance will help you to stay on the top of that list. Okay. We can do a lot of other types of upsells and add-ons. I would say that if you've got a good offer, you should have at least one or two. All right. And again, when we look at the numbers, we got to be willing to face the truth. We're going to cut unprofitable offerings. All right. So things that you have not been profitable at, nor like, or are sick of doing, or particular customers. All right. Make the decision today to stop doing that. All right. Just stop it and see what happens. All right. If you're really concerned about it, just stop doing it for 90 days. You will see that it has nothing but positive impact on your business. All right. When you stop living in a world of scarcity, right? There's no one on this call that should be living in scarcity. We are in a incredibly abundant time, especially as a contractor. If you have a contracting business nowadays, I've never, seen a more abundant time to be a contractor. Think about it, right? We're always going to be in high demand. All right. There's more work around in a 10-kilometer radius than you could ever probably do. All right. So why would we be thinking in scarcity? Right. That's a mindset thing. That's how you are, you're putting yourself in that position. All right. As far as I'm concerned, there's never been a better time and an easier time to, be a contractor, and especially in selling, selling jobs and bringing in opportunities. All right. But you got to have an open mind to it. You got to be willing to do things, all right, for yourself, but also for your customers. And you got to be willing to say no more often than you say yes. I know that might go against everyone's beliefs, all right, but it's not about saying more yes. Right? You want to get to where where you want to go. You want to be the top of your market. All right, learn that word no. All right, focus on the things that are going to help your business grow with the least amount of friction. Okay. So again, how do we go about this? How do we start this process for ourselves? Okay. I'm going to make it really simple for you guys. I want you to list the 3 most profitable jobs. Okay. So think about the 3 most profitable jobs, top 3. Maybe it's a customer, right? Maybe you can remember their name specifically even. All right. I want you to make sure it's validated. Make sure you have a job cost to support that was a profitable job, not a job you enjoyed or you liked. All right. I care less about that. All right. I care more about, was it on paper profitable? All right. When we start to, look at those things carefully, all right, a beautiful thing starts to happen is you recognize a pattern. All right. Maybe your 3 best customers last year were also your 3 most profitable jobs. Why were they profitable, and what made them different than all the other ones that you took on? There's going to be something very obvious that's sticking out. Okay. You want to review your last 5 jobs for profit leaks. Okay. I'd like to share a quick example of this. How many of you guys send out or order your material through a supplier? Maybe use a PO or you call it in. I'm sure everyone here does. Okay. How many of you guys actually have a system, all right, for checking, what they've actually given you an invoice for against those things? How many of you guys are negotiating with suppliers? Okay. How many of you guys are having discussions, actually getting 3 bids and locking in pricing? Okay. There's so many ways to increase your margins, all right, if you're willing to do a little bit of the legwork, especially when it comes to suppliers, okay? Working with subcontractors, finding the other areas of profit leak, firing that employee that pisses you off and doesn't show up on time and, has a low productivity rate. Just fire them. Okay, that's a profit leak. Okay. We can I could go on for days about all the little things that we can do and make adjustments for. Everybody here could find at least 5% additional profit in their business. I promise you. Okay. You want to say no to bad fit work. Just say no. Okay. If you want to, I have a document on literally all the different ways you can say no. All right. I'm happy to share that if you'd like. Right. We want to digitize one process, okay? Checklist, a pre-production meeting, all right, a pre-production agenda, a truck checklist. Like just start looking at small things that you can systemize, and it doesn't have to be complicated, guys. All right? Some of the most profitable and the most cost-saving things are the simplest. They're the things that are going to be the easiest to implement. All right? Don't chase the big, huge things. You know, like implementing a big project management system this week or next week. Don't put that on yourself. Like look for the simpler wins, the lower hanging fruit that are going to bring you immediate results. All right? If you're interested again, using us to, provide you with those systems and, give you those guidance, always happy to share your next steps. All right. SOPs, and when I say SOP, I want to be really, really clear with everybody, especially guys that have gotten into the habit of writing unconnected SOPs in ChatGPT. I don't recommend that anybody's doing that. And what I've been seeing, and maybe you guys can relate, all right, is when you have an SOP, all right, it's only as good as the paper that it's written on, all right, if it gets implemented, right? So if we have a whole team that connects with it and it connects roles and it's built into a training or it's built into a policy that everyone agrees to, right? But what I see a lot is guys start things halfway, use maybe ChatGPT, start building an SOP process, not finishing it completely, and then it flops on the table, right? They try to take it to their team and their team just rejects it. Okay, there's a reason for that, right? We don't just start in the middle of our business. We have to methodically go through it to make SOPs process actually usable. Okay, and I don't believe in just writing SOPs to sit in a PDF on your computer somewhere. We have to be willing to actually implement those. So, I want to talk about a quick case study or success story, right? Bill Wright Construction focused on kitchens only, profits up 40%. Okay, went from being a jack of all trades, doing all types of different renovations, focused only on kitchens. All right, seeing profits up 40%. It's pretty impressive. Okay, so they had the courage just to focus on that one customer. And this is not uncommon, right? So All Trades Inc., and again, we see this pretty often, that a lot of the biggest losses come during periods of growth, right? So when we start to grow too quickly, all right, and lose control of our systems, our processes, or our systems get outgrown, or we don't have them to begin with and just go on gut feelings, all right, this is where the most significant losses occur, all right? And it always ends up in the same situation. Maybe some of you guys have experienced this, where you've tried to grow your business, all right, found that chaos, found that point where, it was too much, and then we have to get smaller. Okay, we have to reduce our size and go into a recovery. All right, we call it refocus, but when we do that, what we're actually doing is hurting our confidence and ability to actually grow and scale the business. A lot of times we are left with, and I'll say it how it is, you're left with some trauma that prevents you from taking opportunities in the future. Okay, you independently put yourself in a smaller box, and I know I'm guilty of it. I know a lot of my customers I've worked with have suffered with this, but when we don't think through these things and don't plan for growth, and we don't really look at the fundamentals of running a successful contracting business, all right, the losses come when we grow out of control, all right, and then unfortunately a lot of us will refrain from doing that again, all right, at our own expense. Okay, is there anybody here that offers more than 5 services? Out of curiosity, anybody here offering more than 5 services?
I'm not offering, but we do a lot more than 5.
Okay, so and I know that you actually do. So you're actually like producing more than 5. So with a general contractor, obviously you would be doing more services, right?
Hmm.
But you'd be subcontracting those, right? But
Correct.
you're actually providing 5 services, which my stance on that. I feel like that's too many variables, right? We can't be good at all those things,
Hmm.
right? So again, that's where, building relationships with people who are very good at the thing that you want to do least, right? You're going to find that, in the contracting world, that's, especially as a general contractor, that's where you should be, right?
We are transitioning to that with your advice.
Yep. Yep. And again, you'll start to see the benefits pretty quickly on that end as long as you get good at selecting your subcontractors, right? And you have a good
Hmm.
system and process in place for that. Because that's where, again, all it takes is one bad subcontractor or two bad subcontractors to, you know, cause you some pain. And then now we put that title on every subcontractor we encounter,
Absolutely.
right? So anybody else here offering more than 5 services? And this would be like an in-house thing. No? Okay.
We kind of, I mean, we don't. We're a flooring company now.
Yep.
I was Gen 2 contracting, and we focused
Okay.
on bathroom and kitchens.
Okay.
But I mean, I didn't have the discipline to say no to anything. So
Right.
I did some stud to stud remodels and things of that nature. But I was raised up as a floorsmith, and so
Hmm.
I realized that most of my profitability was not, I had like a 21 or 22% gross profit margin on remodels. And then I
Yep.
had a 41 to 49% gross profit margin on flooring projects.
Hmm.
So I changed the name from Gen 2 contracting to Gen 2 flooring. And now we focus entirely on flooring. We offer more than 5 types of flooring, but it's all flooring and tile related.
Yep.
So
Right. And again, what you'll find and what a lot of, contractors, especially if you can be single trade, is that first of all, your riches are in your niches. That one thing that you do really, really well, all right, the thing that is, motivating for you, and this is in the single trade side, all right, the better you become at that, and the more you focus on that, all right, you put yourself in a group that, all of a sudden you don't have, pricing issues, right? We don't have volume issues because there's no one to compare to, right? So if you could be the absolute specialist of a certain thing, again, think of the world we're living in, right? People can find you much easier. It's not like just going through the phone book, all right? But people are very much looking for specialists, okay? And when we set our goals and we, put in the discipline to say, hey, I'm not going to do anything outside of this box. Again, now it may feel like you're cutting off opportunity, but that's just FOMO, right? That's the fear of missing out. There's nothing to miss out on, all right? What you want to be able to do is rinse and repeat these things. You want an easy, boring business to run, okay?
what I
Become
actually real
scalable.
oh sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
What I what I actually realized was when I changed over to being a flooring specialist rather than a
Hmm.
remodeler, I actually realized I got a lot more referral work
For sure.
because most people, when they're looking to have something done, no, of course there's exceptions, but what I found in my area is that, oh, hey, I have this flooring issue. Well, they're
Hmm.
not looking for a full remodeler to do that work. So the
Nope.
client that I worked with isn't going to refer me because I'm a contractor or a general contractor. Whereas they're telling all their friends about the tile work or the shower I did. And so,
Yep.
it seemed like it really boosted the word of mouth referrals that I was getting in comparison to when I was contracting.
Totally. Again, we could put it into simple human nature, right? If you had to have your appendix removed today, all right, are you gonna go and look for a general practitioner or are you going to a surgeon,
Right.
right? So people think this way, and again, especially with the world we're living in, people are more and more looking for someone specifically. And we have such a small opportunity to make an impression with them. So when we show up, and even a little bit distorted, and again, as you do business with people in higher income brackets, you realize it even more, right? Those type of people, at least from my experience, they're looking for someone that's going to solve their problem with complete peace of mind. All right. Then you're in a group like there is no one to compare to. It's the guys running around trying to be everything, offering all these services. When they show up, all right, they're not saying the right things. They're not indicating that they can solve a problem that that person has. All right. And again, this is going to continue to compound because look at the way that we look at reviews, right? You want something done a particular way. You want, like, again, if you're doing high-end luxury kitchens, okay, all they have to do is look at your website to know if you can manage their projects, right? Those images, those pictures are telling them right away, right? They look at your reviews, okay? They look where you're located. Like, people do this subconsciously now, okay? And now we add AI to all these things, like the more that you can niche down it. And then I'm talking single trades, right? It changes a little bit in terms of if you are a general contractor, it's more about picking the size of projects and picking the type of customer you're going to work with, right? It's about being very, very careful in having that defined, right? And that is the ticket to growth, because once you figure that out, once you find that spot, all right, and a lot of us, it's been there the whole time, we just didn't recognize it, okay? Marketing is so much easier, okay? And we talked about this last week, but like, if you have a break in your offer, all right, no marketing in the world is going to save you. All right. And the first way to be, dead on, like, is to offer too many things, right? Again, it's like walking up to someone and be like, hey, I can build your house, wash your car, take your dog for a walk, right? Like, what the fuck? Like, is that what people are looking for? No, right? If they want to get their windows replaced, they're calling a window company. If they want to get, and not just any window company, because we know there's differences, right? We're going to look for the ones that carry the high end windows. If I have 80, 90 grand to spend, or 150, 200 grand to spend, do you think I'm looking at the same type of window companies? Do you think that those customers are making the same choice? No. So you get to decide this. This is what I'm trying to say. It's like, a lot of us are waiting for these people just to magically appear, but we're not attracting them. All right. And it's because we're not being intentional enough and saying, hey, and it's funny how it works, right? Because once you lock in and you dedicate to that customer base, even if it's small, all right, like I can tell you, when I started my metal roofing business, people thought I was absolutely nuts, absolutely crazy. I took a big loan out on my house and I bought a roll forming machine, and I am in a rural farm area. Like, there is no cities around, nothing, and I've got a standing seam machine. But I knew something, all right, is that most of the farmers in the area had barns, and there was a lot of steel. Okay, you just had to be able to market to that group of people. And again, like you said with the referrals, like I started the whole company, the whole division, I should say, because we had a roofing company at that point. And within 2 years, it eclipsed everything else that we were doing, just by knowing who would want to buy that product and who needed that and where the demand was, and not worrying about, trying to sell it to everybody. All right. I got comfortable enough to say, hey, no, you know what? You'd be better off, working for this guy, or this guy can help you out. Right. So anybody that's curious on how to say no or still struggling, I threw a document in there that can be helpful. All right. Again, I encourage everybody to have the courage and the discipline to learn to say these things. In your mind, and again, it's just a matter of, deciding and then systemizing that word no. You'll be there, when you can lead score and you can have somebody else set your leads for you, or your appointments rather. All right. And be okay with not, having 50% of your leads not qualify. All right. And that's really how picky you can be, because it's just a numbers game at that point, right? Even if your marketing's on, even within that, we've got to be very, very, intentional and focused on who is going to give us the least amount of aggravation. I'll leave everyone with this last little piece that I sort of live by in terms of looking at business. All right. Simple scales, complicated fails every time. Okay. Even in this really complicated world we live in, and like all the AI, like, trust me on this, guys. Like, it's not going to take all the fancy things. Those things help. All right. AI and all the, the fancy tools and everything that's available. All right. Those things help, but it doesn't help you if you haven't figured out the first thing. All right. And that's who you're going to do business with. If you haven't figured that out and you don't know who that person is, all those things are going to do. And all these other, strategies and tactics and everything else that we're, being pumped into us, all right, is only going to increase your unhappiness and increase, the likelihood of you, finding yourself in these spots where you've worked really hard and made no profits, right? So we got to get the simple things right first, all right, and make your offer simple. Make your, make your customer simple. If you can be, really refined in that area and you can add discipline to that, again, you're going to scale a business, no problem. Okay. Any other questions before we wrap up, guys? Hope everyone got a little bit of value from today. Maybe some good reminders. If anyone's
Absolutely.
interested in booking a call with us, I threw my link in the chat. And Wyatt, you're going to jump on that other link, right?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right,
Yeah,
guys.
I got a lot
Yeah.
and I apologize. I was
No.
late again. I was in the middle of a meeting with a client about refinishing her hardwood floors.
It's all good.
But it's funny because I was in there and I presented a quote for her and I accidentally gave the number too high. I don't know what the issue happened in the system, but the number was too high. And she said, yeah, fuck yeah, let's go, let's do it. And I
Yeah.
said, okay, well, that's fine. And then I came out here and I hopped on the call. And then you were starting to talk about upsells and things of that nature. So I was thinking about it. I'm going to walk back in there. I'm out in her driveway right now. I'm going to walk back in there and offer her some upsells for hardwood sand finishing that we do, as well as a maintenance schedule, because with sand and finish, you want to make sure you keep that finish nice and pristine. She's got dogs and
Right.
kids. So I've actually got some upsells that I didn't think about while I was in there with her during the meeting.
I love that, man.
That I'll go in
That's
there and do
awesome.
right now.
You just made my day. I love it. Like, we can talk about our shit all day long, but it's the taking real action. That's how you get results. Right?
Yeah, shit,
So
yeah. And
good for you,
I'll
dude.
post in the group whether or not she buys the markup. But to be honest, with the way that she said "fuck yeah" to the higher price that I did not expect, that I accidentally gave her, I'm gonna assume she's gonna say let's go.
So
So
here's the thing that most people don't recognize or don't realize until many years down the road. There's actually no strategic value in being anything but the highest price. Did
yeah,
you know that? There is zero strategic value, all right, in terms of building your business or being placed, all right? And it's very simple, okay? When you come in at the highest price, and by the way, I've made it a mission of mine to always be the highest price, okay? I'm absolutely okay with being enormously overpriced compared to everyone else. But what are we comparing to, all right? That's the difference, all right, is that I understand that there is a group of people, it may not be huge, okay, that absolutely are looking for exactly what I offer, and they're always coming out satisfied on the other end because I've learned exactly what they want. All right, I know exactly when they want to be contacted. I know exactly the information they want to see on a page. I know how they make it and emotionally buy from me. Okay, and I'm not taking advantage of anybody at that point. You got to understand that. Like, people get this in their mind, especially if you've been programmed to think that profit's a bad thing or that you're, absolutely to the contrary, right? You got to remember that, those people look at you in status. All right. If you can't, come through the door and justify why you're the highest price and stand there confidently, all right, you don't deserve to be there. Right? It truly means that you get exactly what you put out to this universe, right? So if you know that you're worth every dime of that offer that you're making and you've thought it through, every dollar, where is that going? What are they getting for that? Right? And you've tested it enough and you understand it enough, you're going to hit that spot. And like I said, when you do, all right, that's what takes companies, over and beyond. And that's what brings freedom. I'll be honest with you. Like, that is exactly, it's not marketing, it's not sales, it's not fucking tactics. It's learning that first. Everything else is built on top of that, right? Everything else enhances that experience. But like, until you figure that out, all right, until you stop bringing price and, screwing yourself before you even get started, all right, and putting that as the the main decision decider, then you're going to struggle, right? We're never going to find that customer that we need to be doing business with. Does that make
yeah, and
sense?
absolutely. And another thing too is that if you're competing on price, the being the highest, not having a strategic reason behind it. If you're competing on price, everybody's competing on price.
Well, you're telling.
Everybody's saying, "Hey, I'm the cheaper option. Go with me." And I shit you not, the best clients that I've had have specifically told me, "I chose you because I didn't want to go with the cheap guys." I mean,
Well,
there's a whole
because
fucking
it's exactly. Because again, what do you like when you see a cheap Chinese product, okay? All right, it may actually be just as good as the more expensive one, but how many of us are programmed to know that that's a not of quality product, right? It's
Yep.
just consumerism, right? We're all programmed this way to see that. So like that's what I mean by when you walk through confidently with the highest price, all right? And especially if you're doing tiers and stuff, like then you can really justify and find that range, right? Where your customer's at. All right. But think about the guy that comes through with the lowest bid. Who the, like they don't even fucking like and this guy's walking away thinking he lost the job because of price. Oh, Jay Carter must have underpriced. Oh yeah? No, I sold it for twice the price that you charged. And I do that
Hmm.
I do that to my own companies. Like again, I have other roofing companies and we do that to them that I own. So like again, the more and more you get that out of your head, it has nothing to do with price. 50% of the time. 50% of the time, and that's just statistically, okay?
Yeah.
That half the population, 50% is value orientated. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning the price is less important than, working with someone they can trust, working with somebody that has a good reputation, like all of these other things that we neglect when and we can't actually give them when we're the lowest price, right? Again, can you be the absolute lowest price and the highest quality work? Is that actually possible?
I've got a lot of bad tattoos, man.
Right. There you go,
And
right? So, I
you
mean,
can't have quality and cheap at the same time.
but how many guys go out there and try and do the same thing? We were talking about it last week. Like, I do good quality work. No, that like everyone does good quality work. Of course, like no one's saying they're doing anything but good quality work. But here we go in bumping our chests and saying I do good quality work. You look like a bozo and you force your customer to choose on price because every other bozo comes through the door and says, hey, look at me, I do good quality work. Like
Yeah.
again, and then all you have to be is just a little bit different. We go in and we ask the right questions and we give them a price that's, breathtaking. I will say breathtaking. I've had people literally almost like, what, like, there's no way I can pay double. But like once you start to put all of the things that they're risking by going with the cheaper price, it becomes a lot more obvious why they want to do business with you,
Mm-hmm.
right?
That's funny.
So,
I told the client when we sat down and I was about to go over price with her because I like to go over price in person. And when we sat down, went over price, I told her, okay, now don't choke or hit me after I tell you the price here.
I
So,
love that.
it's like which by the way, she's going to be added to my list of preferred clients avatar because she's an
Right.
attorney, but she's also a state
Ooh.
representative. Hey, listen, I'll tell you
Oh.
this. Hold on.
Oh.
I've worked with her in the past. She's phenomenal. She's not a dirty lawyer.
O-
And
Okay,
she
so
works in, yeah, I know. It's scary. It's scary.
I,
That's what I thought the
I
first time I worked with her.
okay, so when I was thinking of the worst customer I've ever had in my life, okay,
The lawyer.
I don't do work for no. So the same thing. We had a federal crown prosecutor that I did business with about 3 years ago, and I shit you not, we didn't start the job. I'd never been on this man's I'd never been to this man's property. Our company never started it. He started with a $35,000 lawsuit, sued
Oh
me.
shit.
I no word of a lie. He is like one of the top like in where I'm in Ontario, Canada, like recognized everywhere. I couldn't get a lawyer to defend me. He took me right to court. I never started the job. He never gave me a deposit to start the job. We kept messaging him. It was over Christmas. We had a big snowstorm. His house leaked. He's in Florida. He started off with a $35,000 lawsuit, and then again through his tactics, like I was like the way the court case moved and everything else. Like I spent 2 years in court and almost 100 grand defending myself against somebody I never even stepped on their property for. We didn't have a contract. We
Mm.
didn't yeah. So again, when I think of nightmares, lawyer immediately like it triggers a emotional reaction from me.
Yeah,
And
well
again,
she's
it was the craziest thing in the world. But I don't recommend anyone ever works for architects that are doing their own home,
yeah.
contractor that's doing their own home, a lawyer, all right, just say no, all right? And those are hard no's. If I find out, if I even sniff, I don't, you know what? I'm prejudiced against paralegals. If you're a paralegal, I'm not doing business with you. Fuck, get out of here.
Yeah.
Right? I won't even have none of it since like that experience. And I
That's so
like,
funny.
it's wild, but you're like, what the hell has
Oh
happened here,
dude.
right?
Oh, dude, she's awesome to work for, man. We've done work for
There
her
you
in the
go.
past. We sat down to
Yeah.
look at my contract, and she suggested I add a couple things that benefited me
Yeah.
and put her on the lower end. I mean,
Well,
but she's a
that's
special kind of
rare.
person. She's awesome. So,
Yeah.
but anyway, no, yeah, man, this is a great experience. And I'll post to school. I got to get back in there, but I'll post
Yeah.
to school and let you guys know if I win on the upsell or not. Thank you so much, Jay.
Awesome. Yep. Yep.